WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Ouagadougou, 1 p.m. in Porto Novo. Good afternoon, and thank you for staying tuned to West African Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, our top line stories. Senegalese financial experts and economists welcomes government's ban on foreign trips for cabinet officials.
You can understand that a trip involving a small delegation of 3 to 4 people accompanying a minister can cost at least 30 million.
Ministers of alliance states meet in Ouagadougou to adopt measures on fraud reduction.
Behind every act of fraud are schools that are not built, roads that deteriorate, and public services that are weakened.
Imagine political movement in Nigeria. ADC gives INET 72-hour ultimatum to reinstate leadership position on its website. And Ghana's President Mahama arrives in France to co-chair the One Health Summit today. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Jibril Janko.
Many thanks for joining our second broadcast of Newslink. We begin here in Senegal as financial experts and economists have been reacting to the government's ban on foreign trips by state officials. The decision was announced by Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko last Friday. According to Professor Babou Mensah, the frequent travel of government officials, often accompanied by their delegations, cost the state tens of millions of CFA francs each month. Mensah argues that reducing such travel would help streamline public spending and save the state several billion CFA francs annually. He tells WDR that such saving could contribute to easing the country's burden in servicing its external debt. Take a listen.
We have a country like Côte d'Ivoire with at least 30 to 35 ministers. Here, each one has their own international agenda. You can see that ministers are able to travel frequently. At least, there are 2 to 3 ministerial trips per week. As a civil servant, when I travel and I am given a ticket plus a per diem, it costs at least around 1 million CFA francs for just one person like me, and that without them necessarily covering 2 to 3 days or 4 days in 5-star hotels. So, you can understand that a trip involving a small delegation of 3 to 4 people accompanying a minister can cost at least 30 million. This is because of hotel stays and per diems that can exceed 100,000 francs per day. As a result, these trips are extremely expensive and often not essential. I believe this is a sound and rational approach to public finances because Senegal is currently going through a difficult period. On the other hand, revenues must be increased, and on the other hand, expenditure must be reduced through rationalization. It is, in fact, a form of financial management engineering.
Professor Babou Mensah is a lecturer and researcher at the University of Sek Anta Diop in Dakar. Crossing over to the Sahel, the Malian transitional government is intensifying efforts to combat a different type of threat, which it says fuels insurgency across the region. Authorities in Bamako say illicit financial flows are gaining momentum. Thus, a national risk assessment is currently on the way to help tailor more effective responses against the money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Veronique Jai completes the story.
In Mali, ongoing security challenges have led armed groups to increasingly rely on illicit financing to sustain their operations. To counter this, authorities are working to enhance the detection of suspicious financial activities, tighten oversight, and improve coordination among relevant institutions. The Minister of Economy and Finance, Aluseni Sanu, has underscored the urgency of swift action. The initiative also aims to strengthen gaps identified in earlier evaluations, particularly in regulatory and technical areas. Ultimately, the ongoing national risk assessment seeks to boost Mali's credibility with international partners while strengthening the resilience of its financial system.
A report by WDR's Aluchamin Bamako and voiced by Veronique Njai. In Burkina Faso, fraud in extractive sector has resulted in losses estimated at $5 billion over the past 10 years, raising serious concern among authorities. For these and more, ministers, financial and technical experts are meeting in Ouagadougou for an international conference to address the issue, which is also present in the AES member states. The meeting aims to identify root causes of fraud as well as effective strategies to combat it. Here is Abdullah Hassan with the details.
A regional international conference is underway in Ouagadougou to examine the dangers of fraud across the country and other Alliance OSIWA states. The forum brings together several technical and financial experts, including customs officials from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The national coordinator for the fight against fraud in Burkina Faso, Dr. Mohamed Kampaori, warns that fraud weakens states.
Fraud in all forms now lies at the intersection of economic and security exchanges. Fraud no longer merely weakens public finances, it also fuels the threats that undermine the stability of the state.
Kampaori says fraud also fuels insecurity across the Sahel region. In Burkina Faso alone, an estimated $5 billion was lost in the last 10 years, particularly in the extractive sector. Dr. Abubakar Nakanabu is the Burkinabe Minister of Finance.
Behind every act of fraud are schools that are not built, roads that deteriorate, and public services that are weakened. It gradually erodes collective trust and, with it, the state's ability to meet the legitimate expectations of its citizens.
The three-day conference is expected to produce recommendations aimed at tackling fraud and reducing its impact across the Sahel region.
Martin Keba's report presented by Abdullah Hassan.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
To some electoral matters, first in Benin, where former members of the main opposition Democrats Party are now campaigning for the ruling coalition's presidential candidate after joining the ruling camp. Eric Hondute and former vice president of the party, Guy Motokbe, its former spokesperson, have been seen alongside Romuald Wadani at several campaign rallies across the country. Let's join Imo Edet for more.
In Benin, former opposition leaders Eric Hundete and Guy Mitokpe are stepping up their public appearances alongside presidential candidate Romuald Wadani just days after joining the ruling majority. The two politicians have dismissed accusations of betrayal and are actively campaigning for Wadani ahead of the April 12 presidential election. In Kumasi, his political stronghold, Hundete hosted the candidate and urged supporters to back him, citing political stability and continuity of reforms as key reasons for his shift. Mitokwe has also joined the campaign trail, calling for strong voter mobilization. Their influence on the ground is already being felt, helping to expand the ruling camp's support base, including among former opposition voters. However, members of the opposition Democrats Party have condemned the move, describing it as political betrayal and warning that it could weaken party unity. With the vote approaching, these high-profile defections could play a decisive role in the outcome of the election. As a reminder, the nationwide campaign by the two presidential candidates contesting the April 12 vote will come to an end on Friday, April 11, 2026. According to the Electoral Commission, about 7 million voters are expected to take part in the election.
A report by Katoni correspondent Aziz Adam Suli and voiced by Imo Edet. In neighboring Nigeria, tensions are rising within the political space. On Monday, the African Democratic Congress ADC issued a 72-hour ultimatum to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) over the ongoing leadership dispute within the party. The development adds a new dimension to the crisis, with threats of nationwide protests if the electoral body fails to reverse its decision. WDR's Abuja correspondent Yechenu Sase reports.
The ultimatum was issued by the youth wing of the African Democratic Congress, demanding that INEC restore the leadership led by former Senate President David Mark on its official portal. The group says the leadership emerged from a National Executive Committee meeting held in July 2025, which was monitored and initially recognized by the electoral body. Addressing a press conference in Abuja, ADC National Youth Leader Balaribe Rufai accused INEC of undermining democratic processes and acting beyond its constitutional powers. He insisted that only the courts have the authority to interpret legal rulings.
Any attempt to alter this without a final court judgment is illegal, null, void, and unacceptable. We hereby issue a 3-day ultimatum to INEC to immediately restore the Senator David Marks-led leadership on its official portal.
National Secretary, Coalition of Nigerian Civil Society Groups, Ibrahim Garba, warned that a failure to comply within 72 hours would trigger nationwide peaceful protests.
After this expiry of the ultimatum, we are going to take the streets, and our footsteps is going to open up the ears of those that feel they don't want to hear what the Constitution says. Rather, they want to push ahead their own personal agenda.
The group has also called for a public apology from INEC and demanded that the Commission maintain neutrality in handling political party matters. The ultimatum comes amid a prolonged leadership crisis within the party, with multiple factions laying claim to its structure ahead of the 2027 general elections. For WADR, Yechenisa Situ in Abuja.
Elsewhere, President John Dramani Mahama is set to co-chair a major global health summit today in France. Mahama is expected to do so alongside French President Emmanuel Macron in what the presidency describes as a significant moment for Ghana's role in global health leadership. The engagement in Lyon will be followed by bilateral talks in Paris aimed at strengthening diplomatic and economic ties between the two countries. Liberia has moved to strengthen national security by tightening control over civilian-held firearms amid the growing concerns over illicit weapons. President Joseph Boakai's executive order extending the national firearms registration program was communicated on Monday. The move highlights the government's commitment to reducing violent crime, curbing the spread of small arms, and improving public safety. Monrovia adds that the measure is in line with international standards. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
As of early 2026, authorities in Liberia say about 236 civilians have been officially licensed to hold firearms, marking the first phase of a nationwide registration program. The initiative focuses mainly on shotguns and the small caliber pistols and comes after the destruction of more than 3,900 illicit weapons over the past year. Supporting the move, the chairman of the Small Arms Commission, Jerome Kokoya, stressed the importance of proper registration.
Many of these firearms are acquired through illegal means, and the country lacks an accurate record of how many such weapons are currently in circulation.
Officials say only 2 categories of civilian firearms are eligible: hunting rifles and the small caliber pistols for specific security needs. The program also aligns Liberia with international standards and strengthens accountability in weapons control. Security experts have also welcomed the executive order to trace illegal firearms following recent arrests of individuals in neighboring Guinea linked to terrorist networks in the Sahel. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
In Cameroon, the adopted bill by Parliament for the creation of vice president's office is generating concerns among the political class and government experts. Results released by the National Assembly show that out of 222 members of the National Assembly and Senate, 200 voted in favor of the bill, 18 voted against, and 4 were absent. According to the approved bill, the vice president would be appointed by the president and would take over in the event of a vacancy in the presidency. For some of the immediate reactions and concerns, we will be joined by King Aborem, a public affairs commentator in Yaoundé, in the second half of the news. You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM on social media, YouTube and Facebook. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegalese financial experts and economists welcome government's ban on foreign trips for cabinet officials. Ministers of Alliance of Sahel States meet in Ouagadougou to adopt measures on fraud reduction. Emerging political movement in Nigeria, ADC, gives INEC a 72-hour ultimatum to reinstate leadership position on its website. Ghana's President Mahama arrives in France to co-chair the One Health Summit today. Still ahead in the news, ECOWAS allocates more than $260 million in 5 member states for development projects. We also have press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In the Gambia, the police have disabled comments on their official Facebook page following a surge of public pressure of the unresolved killing of 2 officers in 2023. The fatal shooting occurred at the Sukuta Jaban traffic light while the deceased were on duty. The move comes as citizens continue to demand answers with calls for justice dominating online discussions. WDR Sangdana Mendy has reactions in this report.
Usenu Bojang, who had previously been accused in connection with the killings, has now been declared innocent following a court ruling. In the wake of that judgment, citizens have renewed their calls on the government and relevant authorities, pressing for answers on who is now responsible for the deaths as attention shifts back to the unresolved case. The calls intensified after a recent police social media post wishing citizens a happy Easter.
We will still be asking this question because we can't just lose our brothers like that.
But the people that to answer the question are not willing or are not ready to answer that question. The officers themselves needs to tell us who killed the cops.
Genuine and concerned citizens of the Gambia will continue to ask.
The persistent question reflects broader concern about transparency in how the investigation has been conducted and handled. Human rights activist Madi Jobate says the continued silence from authorities risks undermining public trust.
Every day police are investigating murder cases around this country, but where this murder case involves police officers themselves, one would have expected that the same effort, the same initiative, the same,
Largely depend on how openly and transparently the matter is addressed in the days ahead. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdona Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
The ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development has approved major funding to support key infrastructure and development projects across West Africa. At its 95th board meeting, the bank announced a package worth $266.7 million or 30 billion CFA francs targeting projects in Nigeria, the Gambia, Ghana, Senegal, and Côte d'Ivoire. Usman Omar has the details in the following report.
Speaking at the meeting, the president of the ECOWAS Bank for Investment and Development, George Donko, said the new investments highlight a strong commitment to building a more resilient, inclusive, and economically integrated West Africa. A major portion of the funding, $100 million has been allocated to the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway in Nigeria. The project is expected to improve connectivity, ease congestion, and boost regional trade. Further support includes road development in Bauchi State and waste management projects in Lagos aimed at increasing recycling rates, creating 5,000 jobs, and producing 60,000 tons of organic compost annually. For Senegal, 20 billion CFA francs has been approved to strengthen financing for small businesses, improve access to housing, and promote jobs, especially for women and young people. Meanwhile, Ghana will receive $15 million for a tissue manufacturing plant, while Côte d'Ivoire and the Gambia will benefit from funding support to agriculture, private sector growth, and job creation. The bank says these projects are expected to boost infrastructure, support businesses, and drive sustainable economic growth across the region.
Usman Omar reporting.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker is standing by with today's press review.
We begin with the Independent newspaper with the stories: boost for maritime training. China awards Liberia Maritime Authority 2 scholarships. Insurance premiums hiked by 300% as a Central Bank of Liberia looks on the way, and an editorial here says Liberians deserve economic action now. government must unlock stalled growth. The next stop is the New Dawn newspaper with these stories. Sam Jackson recounts wife's death, cause case and injustice. Stand, a civil society group in Liberia, demands expulsion of Guinean ambassador. Movement warns government must act or face organized civil resistance. Our next and final stop is the Heritage newspaper with these stories. Bouaka tightens grip on guns. Vice President Jeremiah Kuhn pledges his support for granted Jida University infrastructure, and midnight accident kills 2 youth in Zula. Well, that does it for this edition of Press Review from Liberia's capital, Monrovia. Thanks so kindly for listening.
Many thanks to Abraham Parker for the Press Review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest is King Aborem, a public affairs commentator in Yaoundé. He joins us with some of the immediate reactions and concerns by citizens across the board on the recent adoption of the bill for the creation of the Vice President's office. Take a listen.
The major concerns, specifically from political parties, is that the issue of the fact that the Vice President has to be appointed by the sitting president hasn't gone down well with the opposition political parties. They were of the opinion that the vice president is a running mate and should be elected by the people. Many are also of the opinion that the government led by President Paul Biya is using this as a quick fix to guarantee his 7-year stay in office, because the argument, like I read in some of the close circles, was that sooner or later we may not even have to have the opportunity to see the sitting president. It will just be the vice president until his mandate ends.
And then there are other arguments that the president's son could be appointed to the vice president position just so that the family retains power and that the ruling party or ruling coalition also stays in power. Which one of these two claims are verifiable?
I have been able to talk to some authorities within the system, and the response is that what is in circulation is fake. Because the bill was adopted on Saturday, and as per the Constitution, the president has 15 days to promulgate that bill into law. And until the law comes out, you can't have an appointment when the law has not been signed by the president. So what we have circulating on social media is largely unverified, is largely fake. We also understand some of these political games, that it's also to test the waters and see what happens, what's the reaction like. So for now, the eyes are watching towards the presidency to see who becomes the first ever vice president as per the constitution of the country. But there's also the clarion call from the two English-speaking sections of the country, the Northwest and the Southwest region, that in as much as the position is yet to sit well with a lot of Cameroonians, consideration should also be given to an Anglophone to occupy that position.
Has there been any reaction from civil society organizations in Cameroon regarding what appears to be a planned succession plan for President Paul Biya and the cabal that many say today runs the country?
I think shockingly, the fact that the bill was being introduced, you would have maybe had people maybe protesting peacefully in front of the National Assembly that we don't want this to happen. But again, we've had nothing from the civil society, like even a press statement. I haven't read any yet about concerns in line with the institution of the position and even the election of the said individual that the president will decide as per his discretion. So civil society has been silent so far. I take you a little bit backward before the presidential elections, leading up to that, the Ministry of Territorial Administration had worked systematically to clamp the wings of some civil society organizations to justify money that they receive in terms of grants in the implementation of their projects. I see this as some form of a scheme that government had put in place to ensure that the civil society has no voice in terms of what the government is doing. No statement from the civil society. The silence is disturbing, and we're just watching.
King Abarema, Public Affairs Commentator in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Well, in sports, Ghana's Black Stallions are preparing for the 2026 Under 17 Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, set for April 25 to May 15. The expanded 16-team tournament offers both a tougher competition and bigger opportunity for the young talents. This year's stakes are higher as the competition also serves as a qualifier for the FIFA Under 17 World Cup in Qatar, with Africa allocated 10 slots. For the Black Stallions, the goal is clear: return to the top. With a proud history at this level, Ghana will rely on the generation to rise to the challenge of a longer, more demanding tournament. As preparations intensify, focus will be on squad selection and tactics, with hopes of turning promise into qualification and possibly another historic one. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa, the Macras Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Umu Danyogo for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram and Facebook at WADR English. Do join Alpha Abubakar for the second edition of Info Shevu as our comprehensive news bulletin at 1 p.m. I am Sankule Jibril Janko. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and